I still remember that afternoon as if it happened yesterday. The sunlight stretching across the living room, the faint ticking of the old wall clock, and my son's voice breaking the stillness with words I never imagined I would hear from him. Words that caught me off guard settled deep in my chest and have echoed there ever since. Sometimes life gives you moments that change you, not in grand dramatic ways, but in quiet, undeniable ones. This was one of those moments. And maybe after you hear it, you'll understand why I can't stop thinking about it. Before I tell you everything, I want to know, from which cities are you watching us today? I love seeing where our little community stretches across the map. So go ahead and type it in the comments. It was early autumn, one of those rare days where the weather feels like it's made just for you. A soft breeze, the scent of fallen leaves, and that golden light that makes even dust floating in the air look beautiful. I had been cleaning the house most of the morning, nothing special, just tidying up the living room, wiping down the coffee table, and folding the throw blankets on the couch. Daniel had stopped by earlier to drop off a few things from the store for me. Bread, milk, some apples. That wasn't unusual. Ever since his father and I separated, Daniel had made a habit of checking in on me. At first I thought it was just politesse, but over the years I realized he genuinely wanted to be there for me. When he came back that afternoon, unannounced this time, I was surprised. I was sitting on the couch reading through a stack of old recipes, thinking about making an apple pie. I remember looking up and seeing him standing in the doorway, his hands in his jacket pockets like he had something on his mind. "Mom," he said with that half smile of his, the one that usually means trouble or a request. "Daniel," I replied, raising an eyebrow. "You're back again. Did you forget something?" He shook his head slowly. "No, just thought I'd stop by. Can I sit?" There was something in his voice, softer than usual, almost hesitant. He sat down across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. His eyes moved over the room before settling on me like he was carefully choosing his words. We started with small talk, how the week had been, how work was going, whether the neighbor's dog was still barking at night. But beneath it I could feel a current, something unspoken. Daniel isn't one to fidget, but that day he kept tapping his thumb against his leg, glancing at me then away. "You've been doing too much around here," he finally said. "All this cleaning, fixing things. You're wearing yourself out." I laughed a little. "Daniel, I'm fine. I've been doing this my whole life." He leaned back, looking serious now. "Yeah, but you shouldn't have to. Not alone." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. It wasn't pity in his voice. It was something warmer, heavier. I tried to brush it off, but my hand stilled on the recipe cards. "I'm not alone. I have you, don't I?" I said it lightly, but the truth hung there between us. Daniel took a deep breath, then leaned forward again. "That's just it, Mom. I want to help more. I mean it. Not just groceries or stopping by. I want to make sure you're okay. Really okay." There it was. The offer. Simple words, but said with a depth that startled me. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The lines at the corners of his eyes from years of smiling, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the strength in his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't the boy I'd raised anymore. He was a man steady and sure. I should have said something right away, but instead I found myself quiet, searching his face for the meaning beneath the words. Was it just care? Was it something more? And why did it make my heart feel so full and unsettled at the same time? He noticed my pause and smiled faintly. "You're thinking too much, Mom. I'm just saying. Let me be here for you. Whatever you need. I don't want you to feel like you have to do everything by yourself." I nodded, but there was a warmth in my chest that wouldn't fade. His voice had that certain weight to it, the kind that makes you believe every word. I didn't realize it then, but that conversation would replay in my mind over and over in the days that followed, each time making me wonder why it had felt so different. As the light outside began to fade, we sat there talking, the conversation meandering from my old apple pie recipe to the little things in life we often overlook. And all the while his offer, unexpected, sincere and unshakable, lingered between us like a promise. By the time he stood to leave, there was an unspoken shift in the air. Something had changed, though neither of us named it. I walked him to the door, my hand brushing his arm as he passed, and for just a moment I felt the strength in him, the quiet, steady kind that doesn't have to prove itself. That night, as I stood in the kitchen slicing apples for the pie, I kept hearing his words. Not just the offer itself, but the way he said it, the care, the certainty. It was the kind of thing you don't expect, but once you hear it, you can't forget. And I knew even then that this wasn't the end of the conversation. Not by a long shot. The pie cooled on the counter overnight, and by morning the sweetness of baked apples still clung to the kitchen like a memory that didn't want to leave. Some light slid in through the blinds in thin, bright ribs, laying stripes across the table where I set 2 plates and a knife, even though I hadn't invited anyone. I told myself it was havoc. Maybe it was hope. Daniel texted at 8:04 a.m. A simple "you up" followed by "coming by. Don't say no." I smiled at the screen even as I rolled my eyes. Felt good to be expected. He arrived with the cool of the morning still on his jacket and a tool bag in his hand like a man with a plan. No knocking, just that familiar creak of the door and his voice calling, "Mom!" As if the house itself would answer him if I didn't. In the kitchen I called back, cutting a test sliver of crust. "You just missed the pie cooling phase. We're at the eating phase now." He grinned as he stepped in, that easy lopsided grin that made lions fan from the corners of his eyes. Then I'm exactly on time. He set the tool bag at the base of the pantry door and washed his hands at the sink like he'd always belonged here. Without asking, he reached for plates, poured coffee, and slid onto the chair across from me. We ate in comfortable quiet for a minute, just forks against plates and the ticking clock. Then he glanced at the tool bag and back at me. "So here's the idea," he said. "I meant what I said yesterday. I want to help. Not in that vague. I'll drop by cents. I made a list." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, crease-worn, ink smudged at the edges, and laid it between us like a map spread for a journey you're not sure you're ready to take. There were items in his handwriting, tidy and stubborn. Tighten porch railing. Oil the door hinges. Fix the gutter over the back step. Replace the bulb in the laundry room. Schedule the dentist you keep putting off. Get the car tires rotated. And then near the bottom, one line not like the others. Find a way to rest that lasts. I felt the air leave my chest a little. "Daniel," I said softly. "This is a lot." "Sus," he said. "I'm not dropping it off like groceries. I'm staying. We'll do it together. And if you hate the plan, we'll tear it up and start again." There was the unexpected part and there was the offer. The words had startled me yesterday, because they arrived wrapped in more than help. They came with presence, with time, with the admission that for too long both of us had lived like our days were separate rooms with closed doors. I traced a finger down the list and stopped at the dentist. "You remember everything," I said. "That's my job," he said. His smile gentler now, "being your son." We started small. He took the squeak out of the pantry hinge with a tiny bottle of oil that smelled faintly like an old bicycle shop, metal and memories. He balanced on the step stool, replaced the laundry bulb, and when the light sprang on bright steady, I heard myself laugh, really laugh, at how simple it was to make a neglected corner of life glow again. Then he stood in the hall, eyeing the framed photos like a curator restoring a gallery. "These are crooked on purpose," he teased. "They've been through a few summers," I said. "Walls shift. People do too. Let's straighten what we can," he said. So we did, sliding frames a hair's breadth to the left, tapping tiny nails, stepping back together to see a life realigned on the wall. There we were, Daniel with a missing front tooth, me in a sweater 2 sizes too big, a blurred picture of a beach where our footprints were briefly, beautifully certain. I reached out to touch the glass, the cool press of time contained, and felt a fullness in my throat. I didn't bother to swallow back. "Mom," he said quietly. "You okay?" "I'm just realizing how long I've been carrying things that were ready to be set down," I said. "I didn't know I could." He nodded like he'd been waiting for me to say it, and just needed to hear it aloud. "That's the point of my offer," he said. "Not to make you feel small or needy. To make room for you." We took a break on the back steps. Mugs warm in our hands, the yard smelling like grass, and the faint sweet ghost of last night's pie. The maple across the fence had begun to turn, one branch ahead of the others, reaching into autumn before anything else was brave enough to try. Daniel watched the squirrels draw confident lines from branch to branch and then set his mug down. "There's one more part," he said, tone careful. "You can veto it, but I think it matters." I waited. "I want to be here on Thursdays," he said. "Every Thursday, no excuses, no errands, only visits." We picked something. Dinner, a walk, a project, a show you like that I pretend to tolerate. It's not about fixing things. It's about making something that stays a habit. So your week has a soft place in it. Something in me loosened. Not a rescue, not grand gestures, just a rhythm. A place to set my breath. I didn't even realize I'd been holding it for so long. That sounds like love, I said, voice small and very sure. That's exactly what it is, he said. We began right then. We drove to the hardware store for gutter brackets and a level, and he insisted I push the cart, even though the only thing in it was a roll of weather stripping and a stubbornly cheerful potted mum I snuck in when his back was turned. He noticed at the register, of course, and put his card down before I could argue. You raised me, he said. Let me raise a flower. Back home, the sky thickened with the kind of clouds that promise a 4 p.m. rain. We moved with the hush of people working in tandem. He on the ladder and me handing up screws, tools, and the small jokes we've always used as a bridge. He told me about a problem at work. Some new manager who measured productivity in emails sent rather than problem solved. And I told him about Mrs. Grace next door, who had decided at 72 to buy roller skates, and who now practiced slow motion gliding along the sidewalk every morning, helmet and knee pads gleaming, determination brighter than both. An hour later, a clean ribbon of gutter ran neat and firm along the back eave, and the first hard drops tapped it like applause. Thunder muttered. The rain came in full, a curtain at once, and Daniel stayed on the ladder a second longer than he needed to. Face turned up, letting himself be rained on like a boy who used to run barefoot until I yelled for him to come in. Hey, I called. Get down here, unless you want pneumonia for dinner. He grinned and climbed down, bringing the storm with him in the off-rain scent of his jacket, in the tiny wet commas on his eyelashes. We stood just inside the threshold, shoulder to shoulder, watching the water rush through the new gutter, a steady line where it used to break and spill. It's holding, he said. It is, I said. So are we. We ate leftovers late, the kind of lunch that pretends to be dinner. And then he took the list out again. He crossed off the things we'd done and tapped the last line. This is the only one with no instructions, he said. Find a way to rest that lasts. I don't know how to do that. I admitted. I know how to nap and how to collapse. Rest is different. Then we'll try things, he said. One a week until something fits. He suggested something for that evening. A small thing, but it felt larger than it was. There's a piano at the community center, he said. They keep it in the hall for anyone to play. Remember when you used to practice those old songs? I'll take you. You don't have to be good. Nobody's grading. We'll just sit there and let the sound fill the empty corners. My heart tripped at the thought, not because I was any good. I wasn't, but because once long ago I'd been a woman who made time for music on purpose. That woman had gotten lost somewhere between long shifts and short nights, between divorce papers and the thin, tired arguments that lead to signing them. Okay, I said, but only if you promise to clap even if I mess up. I'll clap like you won the symphony, he said. The community center was a box of warm light against the evening, a humming hive of small lives intersecting, a knitting circle at one long table, two teenagers practicing a clumsy waltz in the corner, a man at a bulletin board pinning up a flyer for lost keys and finding somehow a conversation instead. The piano stood against the far wall, old and a little out of tune, its wood scarred in the places that had been loved the most. Pressed a key, just one. It answered in a voice that had known better days, and wasn't ashamed of it. Two more, a chord, nothing ambitious. Then something unlocked. Muscle memory, grief, gratitude, all of it. And my hands found the shape of a psalm I used to play when Daniel was small, and the nights were too long. The melody went out into the room, imperfect and brave, and people didn't stop what they were doing so much as they gently tuned to it, like the way you angle your face toward a breeze. Daniel sat beside me on the bench, shoulder warm against mine. He didn't speak, didn't even look at me. He just listened with his whole posture, like a person receiving a gift he understood he wasn't owed. When the last note lilted and fell, he kept still a moment longer, then clapped exactly as promised. Too loud, too proud. A son determined to embarrass his mother just enough to make her laugh. The teenagers threw in some applause of their own. The knitting ladies smiled without pausing their needles. I felt something loosen in my ribs. I hadn't expected the sound to carry what it did. A permission slip to feel glad on purpose. On the drive home, wipers whispering time across the windshield. Daniel said, I know I surprised you with the list with the Thursdays with me. You did, I said. Is it too much? I thought of the hinge singing quietly instead of squeaking, the gutter holding its line, the old song made new by nothing more than being played again. I thought of how the house had felt for years, like a boat tied to a dock with a frayed rope bumping against the pilings, never sinking, never sailing. Today the rope hadn't thickened exactly, but another strand had been woven in, stronger for holding together. It's not too much, I said. It's exactly enough. He exhaled like he'd been storing that breath since yesterday. Then let's keep going, he said. I don't know where it leads, but I know it's better than letting silence decide. At home we stood in the entryway with puddles blooming around our shoes. He looked at the wall of keys, the one on a ceramic hook shaped like a fish, the spare for the shed, the key to a mailbox I no longer had. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key on a plain ring. I had a copy made, he said, pausing when he saw my face. Only if you want it, you can take it back tomorrow. No pressure. For your place, I asked. For mine, he said. And I'd like one for here. Not so I can barge in. So you don't ever feel like you can't call. Keys are for doors. Yeah, but they're also for thresholds. We're not alone in our houses anymore. The gesture struck me deeper than I expected. Not because of access, but because it was a symbol more than a practical thing, a shared horizon. He helped the key out, palm steady, and let me be the one to decide if the offer became real. I closed his fingers around it for a second, just to give myself time to think, then opened them again and took it. You keep her copy, I said. I'll keep mine. I walked to the hook shaped like a fish and slid his key onto it. A small sound of metal on ceramic. A new note in the house's music. We made tea. We didn't talk about big things because we didn't need to. At some point the rain softened and a silver light edged everything, even the ordinary. When he finally stood to leave, he didn't make a speech. He just hugged me and let it last long enough to say things that would have sounded clumsy in words. Thursday, he said at the door. Thursday, I said. After he left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like a book left open on the table, breath caught between pages, the next part waiting. I wiped the counters not because they needed it, but because I liked the small circle of the motion, the way my hand knew what to do. Then I sat on the couch with a pie and a fork, and let the silence be what it was, friendly. His offer played again in my mind, not for its novelty but for its courage. It takes a certain bravery to look at someone you love and say, I'm here even for the parts that aren't neat. And it takes a different kind of courage to answer, okay, stay. Later I wrote Thursday on the calendar. Then I wrote it again on the next week and the next, not as a promise I could break if the day came at me wrong, but as a habit I wanted to keep. As night folded in, I went to the hallway one more time and looked at the photos we'd straightened. None of them had changed. They never would, but the wall felt different. My life did too. Not because it had been upgraded or fixed, but because it had been witnessed. My son had stood with me and said, we can make this steadier. We can hold the line. When I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, the room felt like a new place inside an old one. Outside, the gutters carried the last of the rain away in a steady whisper. Inside, I could finally name what his offer had given me. Not rescue, not reprieve, but room. Room to inhale without bracing. Room to let the next note ring. And that is how his unexpected offer stays with me. Less like a moment and more like a melody. It repeats, it settles, it softens the edges of long days. It reminds me that love is often this simple, this brave, this practical. A list on a countertop. A light in the laundry room.